Hello, everyone. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2020. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Today, my beverage of choice is water. Nothing too terribly interesting. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get right into it. Today, kind of a grab bag, Menagerie Monday, as I'm going to refer to it from now on. Lots of different topics to talk about. Monday is kind of a good day to review, look at things that happened over the weekend, some trends, some big changes, shakeups in the market. There are some announcements that happened today. We'll kind of go through those. Looking forward, looking at releases this week. This is kind of for Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Usually, if you're in the hobby industry, if you own a game store, this is a pretty hectic week. Lots of sets are coming out. We'll kind of go through those. We have Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! The main three that a lot of game stores deal with. Set releases this week. And then we'll kind of look towards the future. We'll talk a bit about Bubble. That's kind of one of the things that's been on a lot of people's minds when it comes to the hobby industry as of late. So all these things, just kind of a mix of topics. No real one primary focus here. Just going through a lot. We have a lot to talk about. Let's get right into it. So over the weekend, we see kind of the changes in the market. Things are starting to shape out. We have the full spoiler. People are starting to play with some of the new Magic stuff, right? Usually with Zendikar Rising, we have the fall set release. This coincides with the major set rotation that happens yearly. The oldest sets rotate out. We have kind of a new year. Usually it triggers a brand new standard. Usually when you have a big piece of what makes up the meta, when it rotates out, the fall set, it makes it much smaller. You have a much more concentrated set of cards to play with, right? We are taking out 3 sets and adding in, we're taking out 4 sets, excuse me, and adding in one new one. Standard becomes much smaller, becomes much more concentrated. There's usually a larger variety of strategies that people are able to employ. So usually this is really the most exciting time for brewers because nothing is established yet. Usually we see big price shakeups that happen right now. We did see some of that this weekend. Probably the 2 cards that were hyped the most, Omnath, Locus of Creation. That's the mythic. That's a 4-card mythic that triggers with landfall in Zendikar Rising. There's a lot of speculation that this card is pretty busted. It creates a lot of very, very powerful mid-range strategies that go very well into a late game. It's 4 colors, so you really have access to the full toolkit of whatever these colors can offer. So it offers a lot of range. You're not really limited by color, right? You're playing everything but black at this point. So a pretty wide range of strategies. There's a lot going on here. The card really kind of does it all. Gives you card advantage, does damage, right? It's a big body, it's an efficient body. It really does it all. A lot of pros kind of caught on that this card's pretty busted. There's a lot of speculation that Standard is largely going to revolve entirely around this card. So this card is actually the most expensive single in Zendikar Rising right now. It is a mythic, so it's really driven towards the top. If it sees play as a 4 in Standard, that's really what's pushing the price. So this card has, I think, more than doubled its price from pre-orders about a week or so ago before all this really caught on. It is a legend, so naturally the EDH crowd will be drawn by it. Landfall, very popular mechanic in EDH. You're already playing a lot of lands. You're already getting multiple land plays on one turn. So triggering landfall multiple times, not that difficult when you have a wide array of fetch lands or ways to ramp mana that put lands directly into play. Very, very easy to trigger on math a lot of times. If this does end up being a major Standard contender and a Commander All-Star, it's likely this price will be pretty high for quite some time until we kind of see more people as the supply slowly increases and people are opening up more and more product, right? Set boosters, draft boosters to kind of drive the price down to meet up with demand. This is very symptomatic of the fall set, usually because people are quick to find strategies that will likely break early on. Right? A week ago, Omnath, not really on anyone's radar. Now that it's certainly gone up quite a bit in price. So again, usually these cards, if there's enough value there, if the demand for Omnath is high enough, then the price may stay up for a little bit. But if the price continues to stay high, if the EV of the set is high enough, that will incentivize people to open up product in mass. And once the supply catches up, then we start to see the prices cool down for a little bit. But right now, once people are still trying to get onto the hype train, once people are still kind of dealing with that like new set buzz, new set excitement, until we kind of see how standard actually plays out, right? If we'll see if Omnath is actually going to be the major contender in standard, we'll kind of have to see how that plays out over the next few weeks, right? So then from there, we can see how Omnath goes in terms of price, whether it stays relatively stable. I do suspect that it will slowly creep down in price. It's just a matter of, does it completely crater in price once people realize that it is beatable, or there are other strategies in standard that can evolve as a result, or if it's going to slowly creep down as demand stays high, but supply slowly meets up to meet demand, to meet a price equilibrium. The other major card that kind of exploded in price as well, Scoot Swarm. It's a 3-drop 1/1. Landfall triggers either a token. If you have 6 or more lands, it triggers a copy of itself. Kind of interesting card. I think there was some buzz about it on social media. On Twitter, I did see people bring attention to it about how crazy this card can get. To me, it seems a little silly. I'm not sold by it. This is kind of a throwback to a similar card in Zendikar, Scoot Mob, I believe is the name of it. It's a 1-drop, it's a 1/1. If you have 6 or more lands at the beginning of your upkeep, get +5/+5, or get 5+1/+1 counters on it, right? So on turn 6, if you're playing this, if it survives through next turn, it becomes a 6/6, and then 11/11, 16/16, etc. So oddly enough, I do remember that when this card was first spoiled in the original Zendikar, and it did come out, this was actually one of the chase rares in the set. People did kind of hail this as the next coming of Tarmogoyf, just a very undercosted green beater that was hyper efficient and that could grow very quickly if left to its own devices. I do understand where people can kind of draw that parallel between the original Scoot Mob and the original Tarmogoyf. As it turns out today, Scoot Mob, bulk rare, no one really cares about it. It didn't really pan out back then. It was never actually Tarmogoyf. It was just a 1-drop that you played on turn 6 that often died very quickly. So that never really panned out. In my mind, even though Scoot Swarm is an upgrade over Scoot Mob, this card is definitely better. I do see it playing out very much in a similar fashion. Granted, this is able to protect itself a little bit. If you do play on turn 6, if you have a fetch land or something, or you're able to trigger it right away, then it makes a copy of itself, so it's a little bit more resilient to removal than the previous Scoot Mob, right? If you played on turn 6 and it just died before your next turn, you don't really get anything out of it other than just playing a 1-drop. Here, if you're able to trigger it right away, you get a copy, it kind of protects itself. It does give you that little bit of a buffer when you're able to hold off and create 2 of these bodies, and then if one dies, you still have 1. That gives you another opportunity next turn to try and grow it, especially if you have Fabled Passage or something, right? A way to trigger 2 of these, it gets a little bit more out of control. I do see where people would be attracted to this. I do see how it does have the potential, but in my mind, a lot of parallels to Scoot Mob. I don't really care for it. I don't think it's a good buy right now. It is also important to note that unlike Omnath, Scoot Mob is a rare rather than a mythic. So even if it were to be good, even if it is a competitive card and does see play as a 4 of, rares are going to be heavily depressed in price if people are opening up draft boxes, set boosters in mass. Draft boxes, we already know, are going to do well because you have the box topper expedition inside, right? So you have that. So that's going to drive the value down depending on how the EV of those look. If it drives down the price very quickly, based on how many people are opening them, there's going to be a huge glut in the mythics, in the rares, especially in the rares. We'll see the rares hit the most. The trend has it that most rares are basically worthless at this point, far less than the value of a pack even. Even the flip dual lands, the modal dual lands, that are drawing a lot of attention. They're really not that expensive. They're really not that much more than the cost of a booster pack. I think most were hovering around $5 or $6 when I last checked on TCG Player towards the beginning of the weekend. I only suspect that as more people open up this product, as more hits the market in mass, it'll just bring the price down very rapidly. And rares, unless it is an absolutely phenomenal rare that's played in multiple formats or multiple decks, I just don't see there being enough demand, enough upward pressure to keep the price up. Whereas I just see a lot of downward pressure from the supply just really flooding the market early on. That'll just bring the price down very quickly. That's how I see it. I could be wrong, but in my experience, I've done enough set releases. I know what the patterns look like. I do suspect that because we've seen a few of these before, right? We've seen this with Throne of Eldraine, with Theros, with Core, right? We are seeing really like the collector booster effect, right? When people are opening up these cards in mass, when you have these large box openings, it's really, really bringing the price of the rares down. There's not been that much of a premium realistically for some of these like upper, like these extended arts, these foils. Even a lot of them aren't really being worth that much, simply because you're opening up so much product nowadays. There's so many different types hitting the market, right? You have collector boosters hitting the market, you have draft boosters hitting the market, you have set boosters hitting the market. People are just buying product, opening them, trying to open up really the top cards. And what that is doing is everything that is realistically not that top premium level card, right? You're talking about like foil box toppers for Zendikar Rising, right? Anything that's not really at the top there, that real premium, that real rare product, everything is going to be depressed because there's just so much of it underneath that, right? You're talking like a pyramid here, right? If we put Expedition box toppers, foil box toppers at the top, right? You have the non-foil versions, kind of a much bigger variant that because you can open up in draft boosters, and then underneath that you kind of have like a much larger supply of mythics as a result, and then at that the giant base of the pyramid, everything that's kind of keeping everything up, right, is all the rares that you're going to open. And if you just think about how much more common each one of those is relative to the tier above it, that's really going to be a good indicator as to how much of this product is out there and how cheap these prices will get. Again, this is my opinion. This is all speculation. I'm just going off of past data, past trends. Realistically, that's how predicting the market works, right? That's kind of what investors look for. It's about trying to get it right in terms of timing, looking at past patterns, past behaviors. That's really kind of, again, what investors look for. That's really what they draw in terms of experience. We're just kind of looking back at the past few sets since we've seen Throne of Eldraine. This is the pattern I've noticed, and I would wager that not much is really going to change. Some of the hiccups that may kind of throw a wrench in this, especially if you're trying to buy in early, is that because we do expect to see the products being somewhat throttled in terms of releases, heavy allocations coming in early, stores may not be getting that same wave right away. We might not see that huge surge that hits the market on TCG players, on their websites, all these pre-sale numbers that come in. If they don't hit right away, then it may be a little bit slower for these prices to settle. So if you're willing to be patient, if you don't need these cards week one right away, it may be worth waiting to see how the prices are changing when we have more copies hitting the market slowly over time, as opposed to a giant wave hitting right away. A lot of copies hit the market and then the price drops relatively quickly. If we have less copies, right, if we only see like 50% of the copies, for example, we talked about how Card Kingdom only got 50% of their allocation in a previous video, right? If we have 50% of the singles hitting, right, it may take a little bit longer for the price wave to kind of cool down. So that's kind of the two major things over the weekend. Zendikar Rising, it is coming out this week. That's something that's kind of on the forefront of people's mind. So this is something that we'll visit again in the coming weeks, right? I will probably talk again a lot about it on Thursday. This is something that I do want to keep visiting, just kind of as we see the life cycle of a set. When I first started doing the series at the beginning of the month, right, Zendikar Rising, we didn't really know very much about it, and then we've kind of talked about it more as we had, the full spoiler, the full review on reveal on everything, And then we started looking at pre-order prices, and now we're kind of at a set release. So this is kind of the culmination of everything. So we've kind of seen the lifespan of the set so far up to this point, up to release date. And then we'll probably touch on it again in the future. Just to review, just to see how we did, and kind of take a look again at how prices have fared, how we did on predictions, and where we're at, just because it does affect overall whenever we see a second wave come in, right? How does this affect it? These are all things that we'll be looking at. Just as a way, it's more data, it's more information for us when we can look at the next set, when we look at the next fall set, right? We can think back to Zendikar and think of what the trends were that we saw, what patterns we saw, how can we use that to establish future data. So enough of that. Over the weekend, one of the major things we did see as well, we talked about the reserve lists. So Legends specifically, kind of a silly thing to say, but a lot of those cards, they are on the reserve list. They're very popular among Commander players, even some of the more obscure ones, some of the more iconic ones. A lot of them have been jumping up in price. Prices have gone up pretty high. Mainly, a lot is speculative. That's what people are suggesting. If you do want to buy them, they are reserve list cards. There's a lot of demand for them right now. So people are really wanting to get in and buy them ahead of the curve. I did sell a fair amount of Legends cards over the weekend as well. I was kind of incentivized once I saw these prices start to hit. I jumped in and listed a lot of Legends cards that have been sitting around. I just kind of want to catch it while people still have it at the forefront of their mind, while people are trying to buy as quickly as possible. If you look at MTG Stocks, that's the price aggregator, it does list the major price changes. You do see a lot of Legends cards up there. I think, again, this is just kind of on trend. People are looking at what they can be buying that would increase in price before these price spikes hit. Now that a lot of these price spikes have started to hit, right? Legends may or may not be that good going forward. But that being said, people are starting to buy pretty obscure Legends in my mind. There were some cards from Legends that I've not seen in a very long time. I knew they were valuable, but the price spikes that are hitting makes it very, very hard in my mind that these prices would stick, especially on the obscure ones, right? Like some of the ones that are much better, that are much more iconic, people may continue to buy, but some of these Legends, to be perfectly honest, are pretty bad. They have no real value to them other than the fact that they are reserve list, they are hard to come by, and buying them out is drawing a lot of attention to them. I don't think they have a lot of value going forward. So do proceed with caution. If you do want a Legends card to play with, I would suggest thinking about buying it sooner rather than later. However, I don't want to create this sense of FOMO where it's going to cause a giant rush of people to go out and buy these Legends cards, which are going to cause them to continue to spike and just kind of perpetuate the cycle. That's not really what smart investing is. It's not really ethical business either. I'm not really looking to do a pump and dump here. I do think a lot of people do listen to MTG Finance content, to listen to this podcast overall to make their hobby cheaper. I think that's a big part of it. Not everyone has a lot of money to be investing. That's something that is kind of a distant topic to a lot of people. So I do suggest that people proceed with caution. Don't get caught up in the hype. We'll kind of talk about what a bubble looks like a little bit later, just to kind of provide a little bit more analysis about that. I do think it's important to keep in mind, but don't just look at MTG stocks, see these large price increases, and just think that you have to go and buy them right away. If you can afford to be patient, it will save you money long term. That's also a big part of investing. There's always another opportunity to buy. You don't have to buy right now. You don't want to get caught up in the excitement and the hype and not be able to think rationally. That's going to cost you more money in the long run. That's something that I advise people to steer away from. So use the data, interpret it how you will, try and make sense of it, and then just be on the lookout for a good deal. Be patient. You'll always find good deals out there. There's no shortage of good deals to be had. That's kind of the nature of a game as big as Magic, hobbies as big as Pokemon. There's always deals to be had. You don't have to feel like you need to buy something right away just because it's there. So that's that. That's kind of what happened over the weekend, kind of the big, more exciting things that did happen regarding Magic. So A lot of that I'm sure we'll visit again in the future. We'll talk about it, reserve lists. Not the first time we've talked about this. Certainly won't be the last time we talk about these reserve list things. Stephen Negus in the chat just found out about your cast through Rain Day / Merfolk. Heard today he was hired by WotC. Glad I found your cast before he stopped doing Magic MTG Finance. So at least I have a new MTG Finance guy. Lol. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I did not know that he was actually hired by WotC. That's very cool. I will actually have to go out and congratulate him after this. This was not news to me, but that's very cool. I do appreciate you joining me here. I did realize that you posted there. I didn't mean to ignore you. It does take me some time to look at comments. I just want to clear things and not get sidetracked by comments, mainly because people do ask questions and it does kind of detract. I do have a very specific outline that I try and go through, and there's a lot to talk about, so that's why I do kind of hold off on these things. There's more than MTG Finance here. I do kind of talk about collectibles as a whole. That's something that just kind of expand the range of this, mainly because I know there's a lot of people who do have questions, who do look at things other than just Magic. So there's Pokemon content, which I'll actually be talking about here in a moment, among others. So right before we went live here a few hours ago, I actually revised my outline a little bit to talk about this. Pokemon, for the people that still play Pokemon Go, they announced that they're doing a collaboration with Longchamp, a French leather company. They produce a lot of expensive high-end luxury goods, bags, cell phone cases, wallets, etc. This is a pretty big deal in my mind. This was something they just recently announced for the Pokemon Go community. This is you can get it as a backpack. It's a visual. It's a nice visual bonus to your character in Pokemon Go. They did announce that this is something that they'll actually make in real life as well. There will actually be this collaboration between Pokemon and Longchamp in real life. They'll actually have these bags. This is something that they'll sell in the future. This is a pretty big deal in my mind. This isn't the first time they've done something like this. There has been a collaboration between Pokemon and Uniqlo or Uniqlo, however you decide to pronounce it. This is Japan's largest clothing company. For the sake of scale, it's not as big here. It is a fairly global brand. There are a lot of people that do wear this around the world. It's, again, very big in Japan. They did $21.2 billion in revenue in 2019, and that's with like roughly a 7% growth over the past years. This is a pretty big deal. This is something that's becoming increasingly more common among major brands, usually among fashion brands. We see this with other things, right? I mentioned Pokemon did it, right? Longchamp isn't the first one. Uniqlo was there before. Adidas is fairly well known for this. Right, we have Yeezys, right? Very big in the sneaker hustle, right? People hustle those. That's Kanye's creation, Kanye West. I'm sure you've heard of him. That's something they've done. They recently announced that they're doing a collaboration with Disney. You can get Disney prints on your sneakers, on clothing, apparel, like track jackets, sweats, etc. This is something that Adidas and Disney has done. Adidas has done very well with these in the past. You can get Disney and Lego. They've done a collaboration. That was just something that popped up on my feed not too long ago that I saw being posted. Adidas and Star Wars, that's something that they've done in the past fairly extensively. You can get sneakers just themed after various Star Wars characters, right? You have Sith, like black and red, kind of the very traditional color schemes that you would think for Star Wars. These are all things that do very well, right? You're getting kind of the best of both worlds. If you like Star Wars, you need shoes, right? Buy Adidas, you can get like cool Star Wars prints on your shoes. People like Disney, people need shoes, people need apparel, right? Buy Adidas apparel with this collaboration. This is very, very common, right? If you really look around, you can see a lot of the big brands kind of doing collaborations with each other. Supreme is very well known for doing this. That's another major clothing brand. They've done collaborations, right? You can get like very, very esoteric things. You can get Supreme Oreos. That was a big rage. I think that was out last year. A lot of people were really hyped about that. right? It's literally just a package of Oreos, except they're Supreme colored, right? You have the kind of the dark red and white, and they're just Oreos. I don't get the hype for Supreme. That's not my thing, but there's a lot of people that will stand in line for this, that go crazy about these things. There's a crazy resale market for Supreme stuff, so it's all out there. But just kind of tying all this in, collaboration, right? The fact that Pokemon is big enough to do a collaboration with Longchamp, pretty big deal, right? We're not talking about kind of hobby to hobby, right? Like Adidas, like clothing with hobby type thing, right? We're talking like this is a hobby Pokemon, right? That has a big enough influence, big enough sway that a company like Longchamp is willing to put the Pokemon logo onto their bags, onto their goods. In my mind, that's a pretty big deal. It really goes to show kind of how like these two big companies are working together to create something that is really kind of expanding their influence, right? Someone that is going to shop at Longchamp may not necessarily know all that much about Pokemon. They might think it's cool, or they might be capturing nostalgia. They might look at it and think that, oh, I have Pokemon cards somewhere. Maybe I should go dig those up, right? Or conversely, someone who is into Pokemon, they might not know what Longchamp is. I know a lot of people that I spoke with, they just had no idea that this company existed. Granted, it's kind of outside the realm, right? Like your typical audience for Pokemon probably not on the market for like $1,000 leather bag, right? Granted, there's not a lot of overlap right there, but that's why collaborations are so good. You're trying to draw these two very, very different spheres, right? People are usually like, these are like two pretty different realms, and you're trying to basically make a Venn diagram out of them. Even if the overlap is very, very small, that's how you get people in, right? If what Pokemon is doing, even if it gets in from the eyes of Longchamp, if they get any amount of Pokemon players to get into their brand, to be buying their bags, that's a huge win for them. Pokemon's mind, if people are going into Longchamp stores and then just kind of reigniting their fuel, getting their passion for Pokemon back, if this is something that people think about again, then that's a win for Pokemon. That's why these collaborations work. It's basically trying to expand the influence you have inside that Venn diagram, right? Sometimes it's very small. Sometimes you might get a tiny, tiny sliver, right? But the goal is to grow that. And that's how you grow a brand. That's how you grow your industry. It's basically raising that influence and getting, a sliver that's this to maybe something like this, right? So if there's, right, prior to this, I imagine there's probably like close to 0% overlap between these two, right? If they get that 0% goes to like 5% overlap, that's a big deal for both of them. And that's why these collaborations work. That's why they're a big deal. Usually they're pretty limited as well. They don't make a lot of these. I don't imagine that these bags will exist in large quantities. It is a luxury item. They're kind of obscure, right? It's still kind of really out there. Again, not the biggest audience. They're probably not getting a lot of people that are going out and buying $1,000 leather bags. But the fact that that's there, that's something that they can capture in the market, is a big deal. And I think that's something that is interesting, that's worth talking about. And it is something to consider going forward. When you see these exclusive collaborations, a lot of times because they're very limited, especially if a lot of these companies are doing it kind of as a test run, not something they're going super deep on, right? There may not be a lot of them, and especially if it's the first time, right, these items may be pretty limited. It may be worth, if you can afford it, right, it's something that may hold value long term. It may have decent resale value down the line. Again, these things are generally pretty exclusive. Most of these collaborations, usually in a lot of cases, it's a one and done. So if it is a one and done, like it is a lot of time, that just kind of fuels how expensive they'll be in the future, especially if you're looking at not a lot being made plus exclusive, right? That's kind of like a winning recipe for something that is guaranteed to do well in the future. So that was the announcement. That was earlier today. You can look at it. There's plenty of news about it online. Pretty cool, worth thinking about, especially for the future. Not for everyone, I understand, but it's there. If you're the audience for it, then in my mind, that's a win for both these companies. That's something that is just adding to how successful these companies are. It's kind of adding to their sphere of influence. And really at the end of the day, that trickles down to how successful the hobby is. So looking forward, we kind of talked about how this is a release week. There's a lot going on. This is actually a release week. There is a Magic set, right? Zendikar Rising, Pokemon set, and Yu-Gi-Oh set all coming out on Thursday/Friday this week. Back when I was working with the game store, this is one of the most hectic weeks of the year. There's just so much going on. I remember there was one year where we were basically just opening up product for 3 days straight. It was just open up product, list product, open up product, list product, open up product, list product. As it came in anticipation to have everything online or stocked in our store, ready to sell for Thursday, for Friday when the product released. This is something that has that's very predictable. Sets for these games are usually released on the same day consistently over the course of the year. This is something that is pretty interesting. A lot of people might think, why would a set, right? If, for example, Pokemon Company, why would they see that if Magic is releasing a set, why are we going to release a set on the same day? And for the most part, it keeps scheduling consistent, right? You can know that these products, whenever these games, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon, when they release their product on a cycle, it becomes much more predictable. You can kind of predict these spikes in retail that happen as a result. And particularly for these products, October is a very slow month in retail. People aren't exactly out shopping, right? It's too early for the holidays. People aren't really catching up on that buzz yet. That's why it's not just unique to these card games, right? Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. We see this across the board, right? Why does Apple always do their keynote event in September and then release the products in October or later, right? It's the same time. Why do you see game consoles being released in November? Again, these people are trying to stay a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of retail. October, slow retail month. There's not a lot going in, mainly because people are looking towards the holidays. People aren't going out and spending money yet. It's a little bit too early. For most people to start thinking about the holidays right away. So these products being released is kind of a way for these stores to generate a bit of a buffer in terms of revenue, because they know that it'll capture the market at the right time. People don't have a lot to spend their money on right now, so they're trying to stay ahead of it. October, so the end of September, October, kind of a slower month. People are starting to come back inside. Right, if you live in the northern hemisphere, right, we're looking at school starting again. People are starting to be inside more. Is a really good time for people to kind of pick up their hobbies during the summer, right? We kind of see a lull in retail as well, kind of for a different reason. Summer, people are wanting to be outside. People are going on vacation. People are out from school. There's more activities that are detracting away from people just being inside and playing cards. And that's really kind of the biggest difference now that all this is in the fall, right? End of September, beginning of October, all this is kind of rushing in. The weather's cooler outside. People are more incentivized to be inside, right? If they're back at school, right? They kind of need a hobby, right? You can't exactly go outside and do outdoor activities. You can't take a long vacation, right? So these hobbies, picking these up, really a good fall-time activity. That's why we kind of see these major set releases come out. In the case of Magic, it's just kind of always tied in with set rotation, right? This is kind of the biggest time. Historically, fall sets have traditionally done the best in terms of retail. I'm sure we can look at the Hasbro quarterly report in a few months when they talk about quarter four, right? It's usually October, November, December, kind of a review. We usually see how well the sets do. Usually, Wizards really puts their heavy hitters in the fall sets. Right, Battle for Zendikar fall set, that did well. Usually it's always a big set, so that's really when they're drawing the most hype, they're drawing the most excitement, because they really want the numbers to be carrying their brand, be carrying their company kind of through these kind of this drier month up until holiday sales pick up again, November, December, in traditional retail outlets. So that's why we see these. Magic, Zendikar Rising, we've already talked about that quite a bit. something we'll explore again more in the future. Pokemon, the release that's coming out is Champion's Path. This is kind of their deviation from your traditional quarterly set that's being released, right? Pokemon, for a very long time, they just did 4 sets a year. It was just once every quarter, boom, 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 like clockwork. In the more recent years, we started to see a deviation from this. They now release a 5th set, of kind of a special set. Champion's Path, that's the name of the set that's coming out. One of the important things to note, because it is a special set, you actually can't go out and buy boxes of it. You can't just go out and buy can't go out and buy a booster box of Champion's Path. That's not something that's available. These packs, they kind of come in different product. A lot of these products will have different numbers of packs inside of them. That's kind of a big part of these specialty packs. So usually this Friday when it comes out, Elite Trainer boxes. We kind of talked about a review of Elite Trainer boxes last week when we talked more about Pokemon. Champion's Path, Elite Trainer boxes, they're very, very hyped. A lot of stores have reported that they are very, very heavily allocated on them. A lot of the stores are getting far, far less than what they had pre-ordered. So there's gonna be kind of a glut at the beginning there. There's also like a pin collection set, kind of a big bulky box. It does contain promos. It does contain I think it's called a pin collection. So there is like a random pin in there. Pin collecting, it's a small market, but it is there. A lot of people like to collect pins. It's a cool thing to put onto your like backpack or whatever. It's just another aspect of Pokemon collecting that people really enjoy. And then they have announced that next month and then into November, they're releasing more and more of these products that do contain Champion's Path booster packs. That's going to be how you're going to get them. Just kind of different collection sets. I think there's a premium collection. It's going to be pretty bulky. The one they have for Hidden Fates, it's a pretty large box. We're talking like, I can't really describe it, but it's a fairly substantial box. It is a lot of air. But is bulky. They're meant to be kind of gifted items. Pokemon, again, we've talked about how Pokemon does marketing very well. They're really hammering kind of this big boxy product that's cool to open, because even though it is a lot of air, they're big, it looks impressive, it makes for a good gift, and it's just kind of cool to open. That's something that's coming out in November. I'll have to look again at the exact date. So that's Champion's Path. It is important to note that even though there is heavy allocation on this, if you simply want the cards inside, do not be overpaying. If you can afford to be patient, do so. A lot of people, again, don't need to be going out and spending money. This is something that is very popular among resellers. There's a lot of hype for it. There's a lot of people that try to order very large quantities to flip them, mainly because they know that the retail on this, if you had pre-ordered and you pre-ordered early, $49.99, that is MSRP on this. Online, most stores are probably selling in the $85 to $100 range. Because it is being short printed, there is not a lot of it out there. So it's going to be a popular target for scalpers. That's just the reality of the situation. Do not be overpaying if you can afford to wait. It is expensive. It is hard to come by. It's going to suck. I know it's really unfortunate. Do not overpay. I imagine that if there's going to be more in the future, there may not be. It's an unfortunate reality. If you can afford to be patient, do so. There will be a lot of big retailers that are opening this for packs that will be piecing it out and selling just the promos. Do not be overpaying if you can. If you can do so, be patient. There will likely be deals. This is right around the holidays. If there is a restock coming in, if you can afford to wait for the pin collections or these premium boxes, right? That's another avenue for you to get packs. Don't overpay. If you care about very specific singles, just spend the money and get the singles instead. Save yourself some money. Don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the hype. It's a really dangerous thing to do. I know we talk a lot about collectibles. We talk about investing. No one wants to be missing out. It kind of feels bad if your pre-order got canceled and now you're looking at having to pay 50% more or even like 100% more than what you had pre-ordered it for. It's an unfortunate reality situation. That's kind of the nature. I imagine COVID has something to do with it in terms of how much they're able to print, how much they're able to distribute to their distributors. And from there, right, the distributors have to allocate how much they can sell to each individual retailer. They have to make sure that everyone gets some, as opposed to a few people getting everything. That's why a lot of people got cut on allocation. It is unfortunate. Do wait. If you can, I implore you, do not overpay. If you can avoid it, save yourself some money. There will be an opportunity to buy again in the future. I could be wrong. This may be a one and done. That would be really rough. That is kind of the nature of collecting. Sometimes you just miss out. It's unfortunate. I wish that weren't the case, but collecting means that there has to be a shortage somewhere. Someone is going to get short of the stick. That's the reality of it. Again, if you can afford to wait, especially if you're doing this as a gift, if you just want to play with your kids, or just buy one box to open for yourself because it's cool, wait. If you can afford to wait for a pin collection or one of these premium collections down the line, do so. There's no reason that you have to be fighting tooth and nail with these, or trying to pay some of these more unscrupulous resellers their asking price. I don't think that's really fair. That's not good for the hobby. It's a bad look for the hobby. But people will do what they can to make money on this. That's the nature of capitalism. That's the nature of the industry we're in. So, again, all I can really say, don't overpay if you don't have to. There will be another opportunity. If you can afford to be patient, be patient. If you just want singles, buy singles. Don't get caught up in this. And there's absolutely no reason to break the bank over it. Charlie had mentioned it is probably a good investment. These summer sets have done well. Or not these summer. These unique kind of special sets have done well. Do what makes sense for you. Don't get caught up in the hype. It's really, really hard to do, especially when there are very cool things in here. Let the singles hit the market. Let these big sellers kind of see what their stock looks like, see if there's a restock, let it sort itself out. In theory, most things will usually end up being right in the end. Worst case, wait for the holidays, see if you can snag a deal there. Don't overpay. Lastly, Yu-Gi-Oh! Rage of Raw. I don't really know much about Yu-Gi-Oh! I look at TCG Player. Apparently there's like a $900 card. It is a ghost rare. I imagine that's the highest rarity in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of different rarities. It's kind of a pain to follow. But apparently there's a $9 card that you can open out of a $60 box. That's kind of mind-blowing to me. I don't know enough about Yu-Gi-Oh! I do plan on having someone on that will talk a little bit more about Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk about their different rarities, what the game looks like in terms of from an investment perspective, from a retailer's perspective. It's just one, not my cup of tea. I just don't know enough about it. I'm not gonna put my money in. I'm not gonna give advice on something that I just don't know enough about. I'd rather leave that to someone who does have the expertise, who does have the background to talk more about it. So those are the three major products coming out this Friday / Thursday, right? Thursday is probably when most people will be shipping out. Friday is the official street release date on this product. So Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh! All coming out. Pretty big deal. Good time. It's a good time for retailers, people that are on top of their ordering, if they had ordered the right amount. Granted, it's hard to say what the right amount looks like from a retailer perspective. You don't know how well it's going to do. You don't know if people are going to cancel orders, right? You don't know what that looks like. It's kind of tough. It's kind of unfortunate. If you were ahead, if you are opening the right amount and you're able to get listed, to be cashing out on early, usually you do kind of get that boon. There's a lot of options. On the flip side, as a consumer, as an investor, if you're looking to buy in, you can capitalize on that, right? You have a lot of stores that do need to make up their money. It is a very cash tight month for people. If a lot of people are buying the trifecta, if they're buying all three and they're struggling to get listed quickly, they do have to be able to sell it back. They do have to be able to pay their distributors. This is a big deal for retailers. So a lot of them motivated to sell. Usually if you wait Thursday, Friday, Saturday even, when a lot of these are hitting the market, that's when you can find the best deals. So there's kind of a balance. you are playing kind of a bit of a game of chicken with the retailers, with the other people who are looking to buy. If cards get below a certain threshold, usually usually people will start buying them. It has been a recurring theme that there's kind of a lower limit on how things can go. The floor is getting higher and higher. People know that if it gets to a certain point, people will just buy. A lot of people have been burned because they thought they would get a better deal. They waited too long. All the cheap copies disappeared, and they actually ended up paying more than what they thought the low point was because the prices rebounded relatively early. That rebound is happening sooner and sooner. There used to be kind of a lag when all the product, all supply, it would hit the market, and then you could kind of wait for sellers to be undercutting each other, kind of the race to the bottom that we talk about a lot. Once that happens, usually people could wait out and get that, and be able to kind of buy at that dip. That dip is becoming shorter and shorter. People are starting to become really savvy. A lot of people know that if they wait too long, they're likely to get punished. So people are being incentivized to buy earlier and earlier. This is a fairly wise decision. FOMO is a very, very real thing. Usually it happens more with reprint sets than new sets, mainly because new sets, when you have new cards, there's kind of a bigger supply. So the dynamic is a little bit different, but people know that if they wait too long, they might end up paying more than what they do right now. That does sometimes cause people to buy a little bit earlier than usual, but often, if you're buying early, that's usually a better strategy than waiting too long and having to end up paying more, because a lot of the big retailers, they sold through all their copies already. That is a fairly common trend. You just have to find what works for you. Find a number that, if you are looking to invest or speculate, or you just want the copies for yourself to play with, find out the price that you're willing to buy in at, and when it hits that price, you should just buy them. It doesn't matter if you're trying to buy 4 copies, 40 copies, 400 copies, right? Find the number that works and then lock in on that number, and when it hits a number, just buy. A lot of people, again, don't get caught up trying to be excessively greedy. That's how people get punished. So you just have to kind of be careful there. Find out what works, find out the number you're comfortable paying, and just commit to that number. So that's kind of a wrap up on the products that are coming out this week. There's all 3. We'll revisit them again, look at how the market plays out, what the trends are, what did well, what didn't. This will be kind of a constant topic that we can revisit. There's a lot to talk about, especially across all 3 games. So we'll see how they do. Moving onward, kind of our last big topic here. It's something that comes up a lot when we talk about this, when we talk about collectibles, when we talk about assets, when we talk about investing, is people say, the collectible market, are we in a bubble right now? And look at that, right? It's a fairly common thing. I'm sure most of us know what a bubble is. But for those who don't have a full grasp on it, a bubble is basically economic cycle. Any part of economics, any part of the economy, any part of assets, any part of investing, is whenever you see something that appreciates very, very rapidly in price. An asset is usually the case, a market is usually the case, when these things appreciate very rapidly in price over a short period of time. And the bubble part is, so that's a bubble. That's when it started to swell, right? These assets increasing in price very rapidly. And then when people say the bubble bursts, that's when, right, that's kind of self-explanatory. The market will retract very quickly as well, often as fast as the market increased in price. So that's a bubble. That's a bubble bursting. That's kind of a very basic, scratch the surface explanation of a bubble and bubble bursting. On Investopedia, kind of a good place if you're looking to start out trying to understand more about economics, which I encourage everyone do. Having an understanding of business, having an understanding of economics, even at its basic, right? You don't have to have like a PhD in economics here. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have a basic understanding of economics, of principles, it gives you a better understanding of how markets work, of how customer behavior works, of how retail works, of how business works. All this will help you long term. It doesn't matter if you're an investor. It doesn't matter if you have a retail operation. It doesn't matter if you're trying to look at becoming a small business owner. These are all things that I implore you to research, to look at, even on a very basic level. This will help you long term. This will help you at any stage of life, a lot of these are real world principles that are very important. Investopedia, if you see something that you don't understand, you don't know, there's a lot of the jargon, right? Not super familiar with people. Go look on Investopedia. Kind of a very basic way to look at it, but it is something that I use, right? I can be upfront about it. Whenever I see something in economics or business I don't understand, I usually refer to Investopedia, kind of a good place to get a basic understanding. So Investopedia, they basically describe a bubble as 5 steps. You have the displacement, right? This is when you have an investor or a group of people, a party, what have you, notice something about the market, an opportunity, right? So then you get people starting to buy in, right? That's where people look at the inefficiency, the reserve lists, right? They're short supply, right? That's kind of the beginning of it, right? Champion's path, shortage and allocations, right? These are all things that kind of put us into the displacement stage. The boom is prices are increasing rapidly. People are starting to see it now. It's drawing a lot of attention. So now you have people who weren't the first ones there. People are starting to see this increase, right? This ramp up. And now people are wanting to buy in. People see, I'm halfway up the mountain. The mountain is still up there. There's still room for me to be making a profit. People are starting to buy in. People are getting caught up in it. What this does, right? You're furthering this boom. So people are starting to buy in, draws attention to more people. Those people want to buy in. Now the people are seeing this, right? It's creating this very positive feedback loop, right? That's kind of the boom cycle. Euphoria, this is when people are peaking out. People are like, man, we're at the top, right? We've made money. If you bought at the bottom, you're just doing very well for yourself. Even if you're buying in the rise, even if you're halfway up, right, you're doing well. You've made money. That's where you've done well with your investment or whatever, right? A lot of people that are rising up to the top, right, they kind of see especially if they bought, kind of in that valley, they're doing very well for themselves, especially kind of these big peaks. That's the boom. That's kind of the end stage of boom. That's euphoria. Profit taking is where people are cashing out, right? People are like, okay, my asset I bought at $1, it's now $50, for example, right? It's a very extreme boom. Right? I'm getting 50 to 1 on my money. I should be selling out now. So I need to sell, right? So $50, right? So maybe people are coming in underneath that, right? Now it's like $49. Right? Like I'm so happy with $49. Even if I spent $5, I'm happy with $49, right? And then, right, the profit taking is where the bubble starts to burst. This is kind of the downturn, as it were, kind of the slide downwards, right? Kind of like when you're peaking at the roller coaster, you can see the precipice, and then kind of, right, like the drop. This is where profit taking kind of begins. Is the beginning of the bubble bursting, right? And then you have panic, right? So now $5 catching up for $49, not quite as good as $1 on $50, right? But now people are starting to see, okay, it's $49. It was $50 before, now it's $49. What happens when someone puts at $45? And then usually this is when the demand is catching up to the supply. This is when everyone who had bought in is wanting to cash out, right? Profit taking. This is when people need to be able to cash out on their speculation, be able to turn their investment into money, right? So now, right, what happens all of a sudden? You have someone who bought $10 trying to get out at like $40, and then, right, your return is nowhere as good. A lot of people want to sell. Now you're seeing like, man, $50 to $49 to $45 to $40, right? How much more is this going to drop? And usually this drop happens very quickly. That's the nature of the bubble bursting, starting to go down, right? So what happens? All of a sudden you may have someone that bought at $30 and they're going to see, oh man, we're at $40 and it's dropping, right? Like maybe I should just get out, right? Even if I bought it at $30 and I cash out $30, this is the break even, right? This is a complete wash, but I lost no money and I wasn't in the market for very long, right? We're looking at very rapid escalation followed by a rapid contraction, right? When both these happen, maybe they weren't in the market very long. Maybe they're okay buying in for $30, seeing that their gamble didn't work out, and then just selling at $30, right? And this is really kind of the panic that happens. This is the panic selling. This is the bubble bursting. This is kind of the end stage of that bubble where, in theory, if the bubble bursts, right, everyone is trying to sell. No one's really buying. If no one's buying, the price on this commodity, on this asset, just slowly depreciating, maybe not back down to $1, but at a point where people are able to buy in again, and then you have that price equilibrium that happens after a bubble, likely higher than $1 on this commodity, but definitely not at the 50, right? The 50 was unsustainable. That's not a realistic price, but maybe somewhere higher than $1, right? You might be looking at like $5 for it now or something. We see this with reserve lists a lot. We've kind of talked about this before. This is something that we'll explore again in the future. But to put some historical context, right, a bubble is an economic concept. This is doesn't apply to trading cards, doesn't apply to just hobbies, right? But the first example of a real bubble that happened was Tulip Mania in the Netherlands, right? Kind of the peak of Dutch colonialism, right? Kind of in the 1600s. This is when the Dutch, they were like among the wealthiest people in Europe, right? This is when the economy was booming, right? You had the Dutch merchants that were making a killing. Amsterdam, if you've ever been there, it's a beautiful city. There's a lot of these canals. There's a lot of these relics from the 1600s, 1700s when they were at the peak of this. Tulip Mania was something that this is an absolutely incredible phenomenon. I would encourage people to read about it. It is absolutely hilarious. You would not think this is real, but this is something that's very well documented. This is something that's studied by economists, because I think in part to it, like the hilarity of the situation and to understanding how real a bubble is. This is also the first time that, to my understanding, that futures trading was a thing. Futures, right? That's trading something at a price that you predict it will be in the future rather than trading the commodity itself. So tulips, right? Literally flowers. People, right? Netherlands, well known for those. People had apparently someone discovered a relatively rare breed that they were importing from somewhere. I think it was like Turkey, somewhere in that region. It was a particularly rare breed of tulips. So it was creating kind of this, right? The beauty of it was people were wanting to buy these tulips, right? They were different than your conventional tulips. These tulips were somehow better. The process of breeding them, growing them, right? There was just this massive craze. People were wanting to buy tulips because they looked better than your conventional tulips that they could buy in the Netherlands, right? You had like royalty that were coming in. People were wanting to buy tulips. So that was causing the prices to just go higher and higher and higher and higher, right? So what you had was, when I refer to the futures trading, people were selling tulips on a promise. You were paying an amount for tulips that you would get at a later time. And of course, right, like the beginning of this was there weren't enough tulips to go around. So it was just, that was what really caused the price to go up. Someone that bought at 5-unit price was selling at 10-unit price. That person at 10-unit price was selling at like 15, right? It just kind of like just goes on and on. Each person has to turn a profit. So the price keeps going up as a result, right? So the futures, right, that was kind of what's causing it to collapse. Or you had people that were going to say that I'm willing to buy tulips at like 50 units, right? 10 times higher than our starting unit of 5. And then all of a sudden they just don't show up to collect on it, right? The person who's selling the tulips or selling the futures, they're not getting paid, right? So they're left holding the bag, and now they have to cash out on it, right? And then that's kind of the bubble collapsing. Right, and the end result was the government actually had to step in, right? Like they had to step in on these merchants and basically kind of like nullify these like contracts that people have regarding the futures trading. It's incredible read. It's very, very interesting. Usually when people refer to tulips, they're referring to the kind of this bubble, this craze that happened, where people realistically were getting excited and people were buying, and like fortunes were being made and lost like overnight on this. It's a very interesting phenomenon. I encourage people to look at it. That's kind of the beginning. That's kind of the first real bubble. Some modern day bubbles that we look at that people may be more familiar with: the Japanese economy in the late 1980s. This was due to the bank just lost my headphones here. This was due to Bank of Japan. They had something to do with it, kind of the market. Everything was just surging very quickly. There's just rapid inflation. I'm not going to go into it here. That happened in the 1980s. That's something that's relatively well known. Something closer to home, the dot-com bubble, late 1900s, or 1990s, right? This is when the internet was becoming very prevalent. People were looking at buying any dot-com business they could, trying to catch on the craze. Obviously, most of these dot-com businesses, they didn't really pan out. Obviously, there's just way too many of them, right? The ones that are at the top, kind of Google. This is when Google established itself in the late 90s. The ones that did the top are giants in the industry right now, but you had a lot of people that tried to buy in very quickly, and they lost a lot of money as a result when their stock portfolio simply didn't pan out. The housing market, right, the most recent one, this kind of culminated in the crash in 2007, 2008, right? Houses were on the market for way, 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 way higher than what people's income could realistically support, right? People were buying houses left and right? Interest rates were low, so it made sense for people to buy. So everyone was doing so, even if they knew they couldn't afford it, right? And then this is what eventually led to the housing market crashing in 2008. And most of us relatively familiar with that one. That one's kind of close to home. The Chinese stock bubble, kind of same thing. We did see this virtual exponential growth in the Chinese economy. It was just like it was just the fastest growing economy for years and years and years on end. A lot of this was unsustainable. A lot of it was very speculative buying, right? This is something that is very, very common in bubbles when we see them, right? What does speculative buying look like? So the Chinese stock bubble, kind of there. So like all these kind of very similar traits, these are very well documented. You can kind of see various inflection points or a trigger point. This happened, so this caused the market to start expanding. This happened, this caused the market to collapse. Again, I would implore people, look at these more, do research on them. There's a lot to see. This is how you draw parallels to where we are right now. Kind of the topic I want to close up on here. Are collectibles in a bubble right now? This is what people keep saying. So the thing about bubble is you can't actually see a bubble burst when you're on the surface of a bubble or you're inside the bubble, right? If we are in a bubble right now, from what it looks like, if we're truly in a bubble, right, we're just seeing prices just go further and further and further and further up and away from us. So that's kind of, right, a bubble is expanding, right? So we're looking at it's just like, the edge, right, the price, something was $100 right now, right? The bubble's expanding. Tomorrow it's $150, right? It's the surface further away than where we are right now, right? So at some point, right, in theory, right, this bubbles are unsustainable. That's the nature of a bubble, right? This $100 commodity, if it goes to like $10,000, right, kind of as a very ridiculous example, right? Like this bubble is going to be from $100 to $10,000, 100 times larger than it is right now, right? That's virtually unheard of in the world of investing, in the world of markets. That's not how markets work, right? But at some point, right, what happens when a bubble gets too big? It pops. So are we in a bubble right now? We can't say. We can't see that. In hindsight, it could be, right? It's easy to say we're in a bubble right now because we keep seeing these commodities, these things get more and more expensive, but we don't actually know if we're in a bubble. A lot of people speculate that we are, right? The argument is that you see a lot of the same principles, right? We're displacement, we see the boom, we see the euphoria, right? People who bought, a long time ago, right? This is like the person who bought it at $1, right? If they bought $1, they may be happy to sell at 50, right? That's a huge, huge, huge return for them, right? And some people, right, even if you bought 5 selling at 49, you're still doing pretty well, right? That's nothing to be unhappy about. That's nothing to scoff at. So a lot of people do say bubble. We do kind of see those patterns, right? That's why looking at past case studies, looking at real world examples, having an understanding of economics is so important to this, right? Because at the end of the day, if the bubble bursts, it's rough to be holding what's left, right? Because you're basically holding air at that point. If these commodities don't pan out, right, then you could have sold it if you didn't sell at 50, right? It may kind of suck that you had to sell at 30 instead or 25 instead, right? When you could have sold at 50. But again, if you're staying at 50 even, right? What's not to say that it can go to 55, 60, 75, 100. We don't know until we're on the other side. Are we in a bubble right now? I'm inclined to say no. I think that there's a lot of other forces going on here. We've talked about this before. People at home, people have more disposable income. There's more visibility. People are able to put their attention onto the market more. Does that mean it's not a bubble? Not necessarily. A lot of these trends, a lot of these patterns could be symptomatic of a bubble, could be things that are important to look out for. But I think the nature of it is that a lot of these prices, even if we do see them retract later, right? Even if the bubble collapses, so to speak, right? Something that's $5 that was $5 is not going to be $5 again, right? Scarcity is a thing, right? Age is a thing, attrition is a thing. These are all things that affect the prices on these commodities, on these collectibles. So even if we do have a retraction, something that was $5 is not going to be $5. It may not be 50, it may not be that peak, right? But something that's $5 may retract to $15, right? 3 times kind of a price increase from where it was, nowhere near the high, but somewhere in between. And I think that's kind of going to be kind of the nature of hobbies going forward. This has been a really weird year. Most of us, again, haven't really dealt with this in our lifetime. The U.S. economy hasn't really kind of dealt with this impending recession before. If that is something that's going to come, the U.S. market has been growing. Record highs were set basically every year, right? Year over year, people are looking at, the Dow Jones, the stock market. Every year, it was doing better than the previous year. And again, kind of symptomatic of a bubble. It may not be as apparent, but you can't have continuous growth without recession. That's kind of how economics works. That's how the real market works. We can draw some parallels, right? For most of us, for the amount of time that most of us have been in the collectible market, right? Like the last time this really happened was 2008, right? When we saw kind of the housing market collapsed. A lot of these Pokemon, Magic, very different game back then. Most of us may not have even been in it, right? That was 12 years ago at this point, right? I was 19 at the time, right? Very, very different time, so to speak. So not a lot of us may have that experience. It may be hard to see exactly what a bubble looks like. So people do draw that parallel. People do kind of see that bursting. I think there are opportunities to be had. That's kind of the nature of this. I'm not going to go on too much longer because we're kind of at the end here. It is something to think about. This is something that I'll continue to revisit in the future. We can look at this time and time again. Again, the unfortunate nature of looking at bubble is until after bubble bursts, it's easy to say, oh, that was clearly a bubble. But when you're standing on the inside and the prices are just kind of slowly going away from you, it may not be as apparent. And that's kind of the tricky part. And that's really what smart investing is. That's kind of understanding economics, being able to buy at the right time. Because when the bubble pops, there's no better time to buy. Because prices hit their low, and then we kind of see the same boom-bust cycle of prices get low, people start to buy, supply dries up, and then it slowly creeps up in price again. And then, in theory, at some point in the distant future, we may see another bubble in the hobby game, in the collectible market. And we just kind of go through this like boom-bust cycle. So that's kind of a very basic understanding of bubbles. It's kind of a basic understanding of where we are right now. There are investments to be had. I'm not saying that because prices are increasing right now, this isn't a good time to invest. This isn't a good time to buy. There's a lot going on. I do think that requires kind of a more in-depth episode. That's probably an episode all on its own that we can talk about. But for now, that's kind of where we are. That's a very basic understanding. Again, I implore you, go out, read up on these daily news. It's very good. Having a very basic understanding of how the stock market works, of how economics works, will do you good in the long run. Especially, again, realistically, if you do want to open up a business, right? These principles do translate to real life. They do translate to more than just the collectibles market. right? This is how people decide whether or not to buy a home, right? Like, does buying a home financially make sense, right? You're trying to capitalize buying a home when there's low interest rates, right? These are all factors that are real world things that do affect our daily lives beyond just the collectibles market. That being said, as always, I'm Edwin. You guys can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe. The weather here in Portland has finally cleared up for the people that have been following. There's been wildfires, so the sky was, for quite some time, very smoky. The air was very hazardous. We did have a thunderstorm over the weekend, and we did get some rain, so all that's kind of cleared up the weather, made it a lot more bearable. It's a little bit more safe to go out. I can finally see the sky properly again, so there's that. Again, wherever you're in the world, stay safe, and then we will be back with more tomorrow. Thanks again for listening.